International best-selling author Robert Bauval turned Egyptology upside down in the mid-1990s when he put forth his Orion Correlation Theory, the hypothesis that the three pyramids of the Giza Plateau in Egypt were laid out to mimic the three stars of the constellation Orion's Belt. His ideas provoked both genuine interest and absolute outrage within academia, and his theory remains controversial. Now, 12 years on, Bauval is back with a new book, The Egypt Code, which not only revisits the Orion Correlation Theory, but goes even further by proposing that the sky was of ultimate importance to the ancient Egyptian conception of cosmic balance. Why did the ancients align their monuments so precisely with the stars? And what were the practical and symbolic reasons behind these mysterious configurations? Robert joins me now live from Cairo to discuss his newest book, The Egypt Code, and answer these very questions. Welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure, Hillary. Good evening. Good morning.
Evening. Well, it's quite late where you are, but thank you so much for joining us.
I don't know if it's late or early, to be honest with you.
Sleepless in Cairo, perhaps. So how did this all begin? What led your intrigue to Giza?
Well, I'll be as brief as possible because it's a long story. As you may know, Hillary, I was in my previous life, I was a construction engineer. And I was, at the time when the theory was sort of brewing in my subconscious, I was working in Saudi Arabia. Again, as you know, I was born in Egypt, so my interest in Egyptology was very amateurish, really. But of course, being here, I had seen the pyramids as a young boy, and one of the things that had always stuck in my mind from the very first time I saw them was what I had read in books about these monuments, that they were tombs for pharaohs. Just didn't work for me. I mean, it just didn't fit what I was seeing. And, you know, it's one of those things that stayed with me through my youth. And anyway, here I am in the early 80s in Saudi Arabia, on my way to visits my mother in Alexandria. I'm from the city of Alexandria. And I decided to stop overnight in Cairo. I'd like to say to your listeners that each one of us has some sort of mission in life. And oddly enough, it's very, very difficult to know what it is. Mine, I had no idea at all. And I call it the falling apple, you know, the Newtonian apple that falls on your head. Mm-hmm. And each one of us has a sort of apple hanging precariously, ready to fall on your head. And if it happens, the big question comes, you know, why is this happening? You know, why is the apple falling? Well, my apple was a picture hung on the wall of a room in the Cairo Museum. And this picture was a overhead aerial photography of the Giza Pyramids. You know, the famous three Giza Pyramids. I had never seen a picture from the air. In those days, I'm talking like the early 80s, there was no Google, and aerial photography was rather rare. So there was I, you know, sort of innocently looking at this photograph, and what I saw was a direct view from about a kilometer up in the air of the three pyramids. I saw two large pyramids in a diagonal alignment, and yet what puzzled me was a smaller pyramid, the so-called third pyramid, offset from this diagonal. And two questions popped in my mind. Why is it offset to the left or to the east of this diagonal? And why is it smaller? And, you know, that's it. My apple had fallen, and I decided to pursue the question. And what I did, I had an old camera with me, an Olympus OM1, in case people are interested. And I took a photograph of this photograph. And I returned to Saudi Arabia. I had it printed, and I stuck it up on my office wall and just looked at it. And the more I looked at it, the more I was intrigued and wanted to know why they had done what I called an anomalistic plan, because it was very obvious that there was a plan here. There was three pyramids of similar geometrical shape on a site that you could see them, the three of them, at once. The two larger ones were obviously laid out along a diagonal. But again, this nagging question, if there was a plan, why would they build a smaller pyramid and offset it? The smaller pyramid thing was that I had read that pharaohs were extremely megalomaniac. They wanted to show for posterity that they could build large monuments for themselves as tombs. In that case, why would a pharaoh want to advertise that he was, quote-unquote, smaller or less powerful than the others by building a small pyramid? So that didn't fit the egomaniacal vision of pharaohs. The other thing, of course, is the offset. And I decided to pursue this. I started reading books about this, and it so happened that a friend of mine living in Saudi Arabia had just also come back from Cairo with a sort of coffee table book about Egypt, and I opened it, and it's one of those peculiar things about synchronicity. I fell on a page which showed the pyramid text, a picture of the pyramid text. These are texts written in 5th dynasty pyramids, pyramids that immediately follow the great pyramids of Giza. And there was a quote, and the quote said, "The king goes to the constellation of Orion." And I thought, there you are, this thought stuck in my head. And a few days later, I found myself in the desert with friends, and one of them was a navigator. And like tonight, we got up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, except that rather than being in a small hotel room in Cairo, I was sitting on a dune, looking at the stars, and this navigator friend of mine pointed at the constellation of Orion. I had never really paid much attention to stars. It wasn't really my thing at the time. And he specifically said, look at the belt stars of Orion. There are 3 stars, very bright stars, in a row. And if you extend the line of these stars, are you still there, Hillary?
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Make a few noises. I'm not sure if the lines are okay. Yeah, well, there you are. He said if you extend the line from the 3 stars backwards, downwards towards the horizon, you can find the star Sirius. And then in an afterthought, he said, well, actually, these 3 stars of Orion's belt are not quite in a row. The little one, the less bright one at the top, is offset to the left. And the proverbial penny dropped in my mind. I mean, there you are. I mean, I was looking at a star map, if you like, of what was on the ground, what I had seen in this picture. And from there on started my big quest to publish this correlation theory, as it's known, that the 3 stars of Orion's belt mimic, or rather the pyramids mimic the pattern, the layout. It's this little offset, and the smaller or less bright star mimicking the smaller pyramid. What clinched it for me was that I wrote to various Egyptologists proposing this idea, and it was apparent that nobody had heard of this. And yet, I got a letter from the late Professor Edwards. He was the curator of the Egyptian department of the British Museum. He was retired, very famous for being one of the world experts, or perhaps the world expert on the Egyptian pyramids. And he pointed out to me that there was indeed a connection between the Great Pyramid and Orion's belt, because a few years before, in the 1960s, an American astronomer with an Egyptian architect, Egyptologist, had been intrigued by shafts that emanate from the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber. I think you know of these.
Yes.
Inside the Great Pyramid. Let me just briefly describe this. I mean, if you look at the cross-section of the Great Pyramid, north-south, you will see 3 chambers. One is a subterranean chamber under the pyramid, but there are 2 chambers in the superstructure of the pyramid, the so-called Queen's Chamber, and above it, the King's Chamber. Mm-hmm. From the King's Chamber emanate what we call shafts. They were known as air shafts, shooting out from the north and south wall. The one of the south wall, they had worked out, these 2 scholars, that it pointed to Orion's belt at the time of the construction of the pyramid, roughly about 2500 BC. So there you are. I mean, to me, that was it. I mean, the text spoke of the king going to Orion's belt. There was a shaft pointing to Orion's belt. And I had seen a pattern of Orion's belt in the layout of the pyramids. Mm-hmm. So, with that, I got very obsessed with publishing this work. This was late 1983, and it took me another 10 years or so to finally get it out in a book form. I published in a Egyptological magazine an article a few years before, but in 1994 came the explosion when I published the Orion Mystery, and like you said, it caused one big
tsunami.
Yeah, it's sort of intellectual tsunami. I wasn't ready for it, to be honest. I mean, I thought, I'll be lucky if a few people read it, but the BBC got hold of it, the broadcasting TV network of England, and a producer called Chris Mann decided to do a major documentary on the day of the launch of the book, so you can imagine the effect. Mm-hmm. And there was I, very innocently waiting for my book to come out, and this documentary shown on prime time, and the next thing I knew is the milkman coming the next morning and say, are you the star man, and the pyramid. It was an amazing buzz. I mean, they called me from the BBC station an hour after the program saying that they were overwhelmed with the phone calls and faxes saying, what's this? I mean, people apparently said they jumped off their chair, and it was one of the strange moments. So there you are. That's how it all started.
Well, I want to ask you, why 10,500 BC? Why would the Egyptians go through such a massive and deliberate task of building such a profound marker to mirror the sky?
I'll take it from telling you or asking you, why would the cathedral builders of Europe in the Middle Ages, in the 12th and 13th century, build these amazingly large monuments, very complex structures, cathedrals, particularly in France, for example, Chartres Cathedral. 2,000 years or so after the events that they're supposed to commemorate. Now, a cathedral or a church, as we know, are commemorating the events of the Bible, and particularly the events of the Christ, of the Messiah. And as you examine those monuments, you will deduce that from the iconography, from the statues, from their design, even if you knew nothing about Christianity, that they're referring to some sort of event, a major event that occurred 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. Well, the same with the pyramids. I mean, the pyramids are commemorating what they call the first time when the god Osiris and his consort Isis established the beginning of pharaonic civilization, of pharaonic theocracy. They believed that these gods had descended from the star world and brought with them all the knowledge and the necessary equipment to launch what we call civilization, and that they were the first pharaohs. So the pyramids are a kind of memory device. I mean, they established there forever the beginning, the great beginning of the pharaonic civilization. It's a kind of message. But it isn't simply that. And perhaps I should explain why suddenly we're talking about 10,500 BC, this beginning, mm-hmm. rather than the date that Egyptologists say the pyramids were built, which is 2,500 BC. So can I do that?
Yes, please.
Well, it is true that the pyramids, or at least the larger parts of the pyramids, are built in 2500 BC. I'm pretty convinced of that. So I'm pretty sure that the Egyptologists are quite correct in giving it that date, 2500 BC. This is confirmed by many things, artifacts, carbon dating, and the shafts, because the shafts are aligned to the stars, as I said earlier, and we have what we call a phenomena of the precession of the equinoxes. Now, I'll be very, very brief on this because I'll cut the jargon, and basically what it is that the planet on which we're on wobbles very slowly in a cycle of 26,000 years, and the effect of this wobble is that the position of the constellation vary very slowly in 26,000 years. So we can use them as a sort of vernier scale to date a monument if we know if it's aligned in some way to a specific star. Now, we had this shaft pointing to Orion's belt. All we had to do was sort of do a bit of calculations. Today you do this on a software that gets you the answer in a fraction of a second. You punch in 2500 BC, the coordinates of Giza, and you push a button, and bang, you can see the ancient skies. And what it will show you is that in 2500 BC, the shaft indeed pointed to Orion's belt, and that locks the pyramid to this date. However, and this is the big however, the constellation of Orion's belt, the three stars of Orion's belt, make an angle, a kind of diagonal angle, if you can imagine that, relative to the Milky Way, which in the pyramid text is associated to some sort of Nile in the sky, or a cosmic Nile. And the angle they make is exactly the angle that the pyramids make relative to the Nile. So the picture of a correlation is really very impressive, because not only they correlated the belt stars to Orion, to the pyramids, but they correlated them in such a way so that the pyramids are placed relative to the Nile the same way that the stars are to the Milky Way. So really you have a very, very striking correlation there. But, and that's a big but, the angle that the stars make as they cross the midpoint of the sky, what we call the meridian, where the shaft is pointing, is not the same as the pyramids on the ground. And this was the big one. I mean, everything worked, everything was fine, and the correlation was perfect. But there you are, the angle wasn't the same. And what you wanted to do was to, what you couldn't do is either go up there and move the stars so that they fitted what was on the ground, or move the pyramids, and you couldn't, of course, do that.
Uh-huh.
But then I realized that you could. What you could do is move the stars if you change the date. And that's the big leap in research, you know. And there you are. I mean, I'm faced with a whole congregation of Egyptologists and philologists and archaeologists and just about every ist you can imagine, saying the pyramids are built in 2500 BC. Mm-hmm. The civilization began, the pharaonic civilization began only a few hundred years before, and that was it. And,
mm-hmm.
Hello?
Hello?
Hillary? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, here...
we can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, what crossed my mind, of course, which is, well, let's see. I mean, the message is from the text and from the analysis of the symbolism and astronomy of the monument, that this is a sort of monumental commemoration of the first-time events, of the events of the coming of Osiris and Isis on Earth. Mm-hmm. Now, Osiris and Isis on Earth are represented in the sky by the constellation of Orion. Orion, to the Egyptians, was Osiris in the sky. And Isis was this beautiful star that followed Orion which is the star Sirius.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are. I mean, I said, wait a minute, are they telling us, look at these stars and work it out, you know? What's this first time business? And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, precession. There is a cycle of 26,000 years. If I go at the beginning of this cycle for Orion's belt, what do I get? And, you know, I pushed the button on my computer and the sky changed slowly. And as it went to the beginning of the cycle for Orion's belt, lo and behold, the stars kind of twisted slowly and fitted precisely the pattern on the ground. And bang, I mean, that was it, you know. I mean, to me, there it was. So here was the final message, you know. I mean, it seems that they left us some sort of stellar game here for us to work out, and this was the beginning, because really, once I was convinced that I was looking at a correlation intended to be looked at in 10,500 BC, then I remember, I mean, of course, the first thing that comes in your mind is why are they doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, fine, it's wonderful, they're telling us about the beginning, but surely the scale of this monument must mean something else. And then I remembered, hey, wait a minute, there is another monument on this site, which I forgot. Or rather, I wasn't linking to this stellar correlation, and that was the Sphinx, of course, the great Sphinx of Giza, which is on the east side of the three pyramids. And here it is again. As I looked at my computer screen with the stars of Orion's belt in 10,500 BC, fitting the pattern of the pyramids on the ground, I looked at the data that the computer gave me, and it said 18 hours. Now, I don't want to, again, talk jargon here. 18 hours mean that what I was looking at was the time of the spring equinox. And so, wait a minute, spring equinox, the sun rises due east, the Sphinx looks due east. So is the message saying, look at the due east and in alignment with the Sphinx? So I turned my attention to the Sphinx. I looked due east at the precise time when Orion's belt is in correlation with the pyramids. And what do I see is indeed the sun rising at the time of the spring equinox due east. And I said to myself, wait a minute, okay, fine. I mean, now I have the sun rising in alignment with the Sphinx. What else? I mean, let's pursue this strange treasure hunt. And then you know, because I knew, of course, by that time a lot about the sky and the stars, I said, wait a minute, there are stars behind the sun, which I can't see. And as I pressed the button on my computer saying, darken the sky so I can see what's behind, I saw the constellation of Leo. And bang, I mean, here we had it. I mean, in 10,500 BC, three pyramids aligned with Orion's belt, and in the east, there's the terrestrial line, the Sphinx, looking at his image in the sky. We had this lock, everything locked to 10,500 BC.
So do you think that they were trying to give us a message of a creation myth? Do you consider Giza the primordial mound, the place of creation then?
Yeah, I do. I think that Giza is much, much older than we think, and indeed perhaps even older than this date of 10,500 BC. As you may or may not know, Hilary, the Great Pyramid is built on a mound. There is a mound inside the bowels of the Great Pyramid. We can't see it, of course, but we know it's there because you can actually see the natural rock and its height. It's about 12 meters above the base of the pyramid. So as you descend into the descending corridor going to the underground chamber, you can actually see the edge of this mound. I mean, it's well known in Egyptology. So this mound was there since time immemorial. And of course, carved deep inside this mound is the subterranean chamber. And many of us now, and I say us because I'm working with the geologist Robert Schoch. You know Robert Schoch of the Boston University. He's the one who analyzed the erosion of the Sphinx to conclude, like I did, but using geology, that the Sphinx is a much older monument. And so, of course, Robert and I are getting together now because he believes, and we arrived at this quite independently, he with geology and I with astronomy, that the underground chamber of the Great Pyramid is in fact a much, much older monument, and that the Great Pyramid, in a sense, caps it, sits on it, to protect it, in a sense. And so we have there a monument probably from the origins of Egyptian civilization, on which the pyramid sits, and finalizes this great project that they had in mind to build a marker, to build a memorial, a message there. But having said this, there is all this business about, well, why would they bring pharaohs there and put sarcophagi, and Egyptologists think that they're tombs and that they performed rituals for the king's resurrection. And this is where it becomes very, very interesting. Shall I proceed there, Hillary, or if you want to ask something else?
No, please, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for giving me the floor. Please interrupt me because, I'm a writer.
Well, Robert, what I'm interested in, too, is it just seems like such a grand undertaking. And so I'm curious, and I've always been curious, and one of the reasons that draws me to Egypt also, I've been as well, is that it just when you're there in the presence of the pyramids and you're standing there, you just feel your humanity. And you're so in awe of the grand, architecture of the entire complex. It just really feels like it opens up even, gateways within yourself, within your own higher consciousness, and so I've always been drawn to why they would go through such elaborate means to align their temples to those specific stars. And I've always wondered, honestly, if the Egyptians got their knowledge and their understanding of the creation myths from cultures that predated them, because you have temples like the Valley Temple, you have the Osirian that predate the Egyptian cultures. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be the writer. What an amazing composition you made. Are you reading something or it just comes off your head?
No, it just pops in my head.
Well done. Okay, well, that's the question I was hoping you'd ask, because indeed, to me, I've seen these monuments zillions of times. I just spent 3 years in an apartment overlooking the Great Pyramid. I could almost reach out and touch it. So I know the Great Pyramid like I know the back of my hand. And I can tell you, like you yourself have just so eloquently described, that, every time you look at this monument, you get a hit, and everything stirs in your senses. You're impressed by the scale of the monument. It's silence because it's there, and, it has no inscriptions, by the way, as you know. And it sits silently in this amazing surrounding, provoking you, stimulating every fiber of yourself, of your mind, of your senses to ask why? What are you doing here? What are you trying to tell me? You shouldn't be here. You're too big, you're too large, you're too perfect. And that's what it does to me all the time. I used to go on my balcony and with a cup of coffee, and it hits you. And of course, it hits you in so many different ways. It depends, what's your frame of mind? Is it sunset? Is it sunrise? What's in your thoughts? So really, it's there to provoke human beings to ask the big primordial questions, because ultimately, what's provoking you to ask is the questions that we have or should have, the questions the ancient Egyptians had, and the questions that civilization and humanity will have perhaps forever. Who are we? Where do we come from? Mm-hmm. What are we supposed to do here?
Do you think that they're asking us? Do you think that they're asking us, Robert, to look to the stars?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I don't want to get too metaphysical here, but I remember always the great phrase of Carl Sagan, your cosmologist, the late Carl Sagan, who said, "We are star stuff," and that's what we are. I mean, we literally are made from star material. I mean, some star billions of years ago exploded somewhere, and we're it. I mean, we're the result of this explosion of a bit of a star that formed the solar system, the Earth, this billions of years of evolution, and we are star stuff become conscious, Hillary. I mean, that's what we are. I mean, if we were to define ourselves, and perhaps we're supposed to find out where did we come from. Who are we? Because that's it. I mean, if anything matters, is to answer these questions. The rest is just existing and having fun. I'm all for that, but I mean, really, we as a civilization have begun to forget that we're meant to ask these questions and pursue this great mission of the human race. The Egyptians didn't. The Egyptians knew intuitively. I mean, there's something else about us as star matter, is that we have a lot of wonderful faculties, and we think that if we can't explain something scientifically, then it doesn't exist. But we have a faculty that we call intuition, we call inner knowledge, and the Egyptians used it to its fullest capacity, and maybe they were able to answer these questions long ago. Maybe they did know, and maybe they're telling us in such a dramatic way, we left you the knowledge. Mm-hmm. So to ignore this possibility, and to treat them as tombs, and to go and take photographs and not pursue the ultimate message of these monuments, to me is a sin. I mean, these people have put such a tremendous effort. It's so obvious when you're there, and they would probably laugh or be so sad that we call them tombs, mm-hmm. rather than call them their ultimate, penultimate expression of their beliefs and perhaps their knowledge. So that's what they're about, Hillary, and every one of us has a duty, in a sense, to pursue these questions. Because if only one of us comes up with the answers, then the mission of humanity has been achieved. Mm-hmm. What's the point of all this if we never find out who we are and what we're supposed to do and where do we go?
Why do you think?
I've gone metaphysical. You got me talking. Well, it's 3 in the morning, it's 4 in the morning.
It's my show tends to do that, by the way. We tend to go into the metaphysical. So 10,500 BC, I mean, they undertook this and they created this incredible reincarnation of events of our creation myth. So, it just is I've always wondered if perhaps it marked a cataclysmic event. There's so much talk with 2012 coming, the Mayan calendar ending. There's lots of different cultures that have this specific date marked in their very old ancient records. And I'm curious if you think that perhaps they were marking something for us to pay attention to along those lines.
You're spot on. I mean, I'm sure that they are a kind of a reminder. I mean, the word reminder comes to mind. They're kind of telling us to not forget something. And I think, to me, rather than a catastrophic event, they're telling us to not forget what you're here for. Do not forget the mission. Let me say that one of the big controversies, of course, that these theories have caused, and I'm not alone in this, as you know, John West, the writer who's here in Egypt, by the way. I've just seen John West a few days ago at the Mena House Hotel, and we gave a talk to a group of people. But John West and Robert Schoch have been part, and Graham Hancock, of course, my co-author. We've been part of a kind of loose team. You know, they call us the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. You know, charging against academia. You know, we all look like Don Quixotes these days. You know, we're getting old now.
Yeah.
And but it's true, you know, we've been sort of facing this huge academic tsunami, barrage of academics saying this is okay. I mean, the geology says the Sphinx is old. Okay, we can buy that. The astronomy is saying it, but you know, where's the evidence? I mean, where is anything to do with 10,500 BC? Well, we've got the answers now because, as you know, I've been doing a lot of expeditions in the Egyptian Sahara, and the evidence is there, Hilary. I mean, the evidence is there. There is evidence of a high culture that pre-existed the pharaohs, who knew astronomy, who tracked. Are you talking
about Nabta Playa?
I'm talking about Nabta Playa, but I'm talking about indeed the whole southwest of the Egyptian Sahara. Try and visualize it. I mean, the extreme southwest is a kind of wedge of the Egyptian land, wedging into Libya and Sudan. It's the furthest point that you can go, and you can literally stand at that point and have a part of you in Sudan, a part of you in Libya, and a part of you in Egypt. And that particular point has a very, very mysterious region, a sort of prehistoric Shangri-La. You know, the desert is all sand and flat and with a few dunes around, and suddenly emerges a kind of gigantic rocky iceberg sprouting out of the desert. Very, very mysterious. It's one hell of a trek, I can tell you. I've been there in April. You drive to the oasis of of Dakhla, in the central Egyptian Sahara, and then you have a 5-day drive with 4-wheel drives in the open desert. I mean, you're sailing a sea of sand. It's quite amazing, and you get there and you feel like you've arrived on planet Mars. It's so alien, so wildly alien. And there you are, confronted with this sort of Switzerland without trees, if you like, in the desert. And lo and behold, it's full of prehistoric evidence. I mean, there's wonderful artifacts lying on the ground, and images drawn or carved on rocks in caves, with people, black people, having domesticated cattle, living in very sophisticated housings. And this is thousands of years before the pharaohs emerged. Now, you mentioned the Nabta Playa. We're very, very certain that these people eventually, when the desert became, because the Sahara, by the way, Hilary, was very fertile in prehistoric times. It was a kind of paradisical region with wonderful lakes and savannas and jungles and forests, because the rock art that we see there has animals that could not possibly live today there. You know, you see elephants and ostriches and lions, and clearly there was a lot of water there. But eventually the Sahara began to be dry, and indeed there was a catastrophic event. The breaking up of the Ice Age caused all sorts of havoc around the world. Are we running out of time here?
I know we are. Okay, we could probably talk for another hour.
Hey, listen, I want to advertise my new book, which is the Egypt Code. Let me leave this business about the origins, because in fact I'm writing a book about the Egyptian Sahara and how what we found there, the Nabta Playa, with all this magical astronomy. As you know, there is a ceremonial site at Nabta which is thousands of years old before the Pharaoh, which contains a kind of mini Stonehenge, and stones aligned to the rising of stars. And the stars, lo and behold, are the stars of Orion's belt and Sirius. So clearly here is the very roots of the ideologies, of the stellar beliefs of the pharaohs that go back thousands of years to this prehistoric culture of the Sahara. So I want to leave that just to say that I'm writing a book called Black Genesis for obvious reasons. I believe that the genesis of the pharaonic civilization comes from black people, very mysterious black people. I'm calling them the star people because everything about them has to do with the stars. It's fascinating. And I'm writing this book with Thomas Brophy, the astrophysicist, who has come with me on an expedition to the Sahara, has seen all that, and is absolutely fascinated. And we've just signed a contract with an American publisher to publish Black Genesis. It'll be out next year, and I hope to be talking on your radio, Hillary.
I hope so, too, because, in fact, Robert, there's some interesting research out there that the face of the Sphinx is actually a black African woman.
You got it there. You got it.
And I would love to have you back on to talk about that. It's also interesting that the Zulu shamans have a creation myth of their own, that the life began with planet Mars and that beautiful women were placed on a ship, which they pronounced Merkaba, and interestingly enough was very similar to the Hebrew word Merkaba, which means the divine vehicle used by angels to visit human creation. Angels are higher intelligence. So it's really interesting how all of these things combine to ask us to look upwards, to question our beginnings.
Yeah. I leave all that to you. I mean, the way to really get this thing off the ground in a big way is to play the game and to fight the battle using the turf of those who are opposing it. And so Robert Schoch, Thomas Brophy, Graham Hancock, myself, John West are winning ground here. And let me tell you, there is a tsunami coming their way now. The tables are turning. The evidence is so overwhelming that there was indeed a prehistoric, pre-Diluvian, perhaps magnificent culture that found its way in the Egyptian Sahara. They probably came from Central Africa, established for thousands of years a base, evolved wonderfully and knew the stars, and may indeed have known their origins in the stars, and finally settled in the Nile Valley. And the result of all this is all these wonderful temples and pyramids. And they've left us a message. They've left us almost an eternal message in the pyramid structures for us to understand and know where we come from. At least we will know where we come from. And perhaps, who knows, where we're going. And that's very important. We're in that moment of balance where things are changing big time in the world. The economic crisis, there is a buzz going on. And I think that this message of Egypt, this message of the pyramid, is about to burst out in big time. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm bringing all these people together. We're doing a conference in Rome, by the way, next month. Robert Schoch, Thomas Brophy, everybody. And we're starting to tell the world. The conference is called Black Genesis. It's going to be in Rome in a major hotel, and we're hoping to bring this team sometime along the line very soon to the United States and open up the big battle here again. So there you are. That's what's going on, Hillary. And now I'd like to say that those who want to know more about this, in my latest book, The Egypt Code, which is published in the United States by Disinformation of New York publishers, has what the other versions, the English version, and I've got many now translations of the Egypt Code, do not have. And that is 2 appendices to give you a taste of what's to come. So there is two appendices speaking about this black origins and this black genesis and how it links to the pharaonic civilization. So there you are. Have your last question, Hillary.
Well, I'm just interested to know, too, your thoughts real quick while we wrap up our hour together. As there seems to be an awakening of consciousness, higher consciousness in the earth today with all people, how we may be perhaps remembering our true origins just because of this global awakening of consciousness, and it just feels to me like people, as they begin to become aware of their destiny and what they're meant to do here, that the world is in fact changing at a far, far greater speed than it's ever has. And I just am curious to know, was this in fact your destiny, and do you feel that you have in fact accomplished what you are here to accomplish in your lifetime?
Well, give me a few more years. I'm not ready. I'm ready to back up and go yet. But indeed, I mean, I'm very grateful to the universe for having given me my mission. I mean, I know what my mission is, and it's not all the answer, but it is part of the answer. My mission is to focus on these monuments. I've studied them for 30 years, and it's paid off. I mean, something wonderful is coming out of there, and it's changed me. I mean, I'm a very different human being from where I started. I'm looking. I'm seeing myself in a very different light. I now see myself as a citizen, not just of the world. I see myself as a citizen of the cosmos. I belong out there, and there is the reminder that we are not just creatures of this planet. We are wonderful, magnificent energies that belong to the cosmos, and I'm beginning to feel that, because of these studies. So, we all have the divine spark, like I said at the beginning. We all have our mission. I don't know what yours are, but whatever it is, we should find what it is and follow it, because finally all these missions merge, because really they all are part of one big united mission, which is the mission of humanity. And indeed, I mean, like I keep saying to everybody, I mean, I feel that we're approaching a time when there is going to be a major shift, a shift that's going to take us away from a maddening rush towards self-destruction by being focused on material gains and a mad technology that's taking us nowhere, and start focusing again on our spiritual mission. Mm-hmm. We forget this, and we need to be reminded, and this is what these pyramids are doing. Wake up. You have a spiritual mission, and you have a spirit, and the spirit is eternal, and nurture it now. I mean, come on, guys, it's time to do it. And I think that's what's happening, and one feels it, with the American elections, with the movements that are going around the world, and eventually it will reach, hopefully, a kind of mass effect where the shift is going to occur globally. But it begins with people like us, to start talking about it and start spreading the word until finally we sit down and say, okay, we've gone too far on the wrong track here. Let's get back on track. Let's realign ourselves to the stars. That's how I see it.
True words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us all the way from Cairo.
It was a pleasure, Hilary.
Good luck with all you do.
And I look forward to seeing your group in March.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you as well. I think
we're kind of... By the way, we're crossing paths at the Sphinx, I think. Around equinox time. There you are. The spring equinox, the moment of creation, will be there, all of us, and let's have some good talks there. Okay, Hilary, thanks. Excellent.
Thank you so much, Robert.